Yes, hello. I'm a computer scientist, and I was very pleased yesterday to find I'm not the only one. I usually work with deceptive AI and goal recognition. But and I'm working at the moment at King's College with the Trustworthy Autonomous Systems Lab. But this work was done with psychologists and magicians here at Goldmiths and also at University of Melbourne. And this is about combined methods and what Darwin Ortiz has called the veil principle. And my particular interest in it is how can we model that in terms of counterfactual reasoning. Oh, hang on. Okay.
Let's have to click first.
Click first?
Yeah, I minimized it. So, yeah, and then, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Computer scientists can never use the technology. So what is the veil principle? It's that as you will probably know, it's where you've got something that you want to conceal. And although one way of concealing it won't be effective, an audience would see straight through it, as soon as you put a few of those methods on top of one another, they quickly become, the secret can be quickly obscured. So that's a well-known principle to magicians, but also very handy in privacy applications. Ortiz demonstrated this, bless you, in terms of a trick by the amazing Kreskin. And that trick is where Kreskin would spread out the cards, cover them with a newspaper, and then take a dagger and stab through the newspaper and pull away the newspaper to reveal that only one card has been stabbed. Now, if you just named that card, people would think, oh, well, the cards must be marked. So instead, he produces a deck of cards that he prepared earlier, in which the only card, which is the wrong way up, is the same card that was stabbed. And again, if he just named a card and then produced a deck with it turned over, people might think of something funny about the deck of cards. But in this case, people have trouble putting together the two things. How did he manage to name the stabbed card? And how did he predict which card was being stabbed? So there are many informal explanations for why this works. One is what they call the Swiss cheese principle, which is also well known in security, where you've got several different mysteries, but the hidden bits are in the wrong places for each other. Another explanation is that people think in terms of cause and effect, and they just look for one reason. And so they don't think to look for more than one reason. This, as soon as you multiply the possibilities, people's circuits get overloaded. And this idea that there can be a combinatorial explosion in the search space, people just can't deal with the number of possibilities. There's also in this particular trick, you've got these unusual elements which distract from any method. So there are a couple of kind of curly extras in there. This is our study, and this was suggested by some observations in the Jerx blog. So the basic pattern of the trick that we use here is the magician spreads some cards, the audience member takes a card, and the magician names the card. Very simple. We did it in three conditions. One, cards are face down. One where the cards are face up, but the magician is blindfolded. And then where both things apply. Cards are face down and the magician is blindfolded. It's a preliminary study, only 60 participants, and it was done online. It was a between subjects experiment, which means, you know, everybody saw all three versions of the trick, but in different orders. And our only prediction really was that there should be more people who are fooled by this version than the other versions. This is what we found. The numbers that I'm going to show you are just from people who were seeing the particular version of the trick for the first time. And this is how we coded it up. The explanations that they gave for that question, how did the magician name the cards? So this is what we found. When they were face down, 63% of people seeing that when they saw that for the first time guessed that it was marked cards. When he was just wearing the blindfold, again, over 50% guess that he can see through the blindfold. But when we put the two things together, only 4.5% guessed that both things applied. That's 1 out of 22 people. So it's not, obviously this is a small study, but that was the result, and that result held up even when people were seeing this trick for the third time. So they'd seen it with just with the blindfold, they'd seen it just with the cards face down, and now they were seeing it for the third time with both. The rate only increased to 7.9%. So interesting results, quite a strong result. And the other thing to notice there is that an awful lot of people thought that something else gave us their explanation something completely different. So we've seen there are all these different informal explanations. The one that I prefer is to do with counterfactual reasoning. So counterfactuals, what are they? They're the way we explain what would have happened if this true thing were false, or if this false thing were true. So, for example, if this sick child what would have happened if this sick child had been vaccinated, for example? Or it's also the way that we explain human behavior, including to ourselves. So, for example, I slammed on the brakes. If I hadn't slammed on the brakes, I would have hit that tree. Or if I say, why did you take that particular route? Well, if I had taken the other route, we'd have been late. And these sort of explanations have become very important in explainable AI. So in that field, we found not only that people like to use counterfactuals as their explanations, but also particular things about them. They like a counterfactual, or I should say, like a counterfactual that directly affects the outcome, and also one that changes as few things as possible. So what we call the closest possible world. How does that apply in our case? Well, the magician names a card, and the way the magician presents that naming of the card is either he could see the cards or it was real magic. Well, it couldn't be real magic, so he must have seen the cards. Well, if he saw the cards, either they were visible or he was looking at, and he needed to be visible and he needed to be looking at them. Well, they weren't visible and he wasn't looking at them, so he didn't see the cards, but it can't have been real magic, so there must be some other reason. And that's what 68% of people said. And so one of the things I like about the counterfactual explanation is that it gives us some way of explaining why people find something else, some other way to explain, not just this trick actually, but any trick. Because if we were to say, oh, well, it's real magic, it just changes too many things about the world. So, yeah. So the other reason that I like to use counterfactuals, or the idea of using counterfactuals, is they open the door to causal reasoning, and that gives us some numbers to play with. So when 100% of the method was that the cards were marked, That was detected by 63.6% of the people. When 100% of the methods was the blindfold, that was detected by 53.5% of people. Now we've got both of those methods contributing 50% each of the method. Now we can make a prediction. By halving those percentages, when we put it together, what we get is 8.5% that can be expected to detect the method. Now, that's not exactly what we got, but it's pretty close. And of course, this is a preliminary study. But the goal here, from my point of view, is if we can formalize this, maybe in a privacy context, we can maybe be able to take a set of factors that could all contribute to deception. And any one of them could individually contribute to deception. We may be able to predict the probable impact of combining them and the optimal, perhaps, combination. That could be quite useful. So obviously, there's quite a lot more to do. Need to formalize that model, see if it really works, and consider some alternatives. There are a lot of other possibilities, and we talked about a lot of other things that may also be going on. We need to repeat the experiment with a considerably larger sample, and we also need to try it with other tricks, because now we've got that model and need to see, does it hold up if we do it in some other way or in some other domain. My colleagues would also like to do some other things. For example, focus on the order analysis. What difference is it making when if the audience sees the trick in different orders, you know, and what happens when can we compare repeated deceptions with switching methods between the repetitions? And that's all I got.